King Charles had faced public scandal, private grief, and decades of judgment. But nothing prepared him for the handwritten pages placed before him inside a silent room at Windsor Castle. The letter carried Diana's unmistakable signature. It was addressed directly to Camilla. And as Charles read the final paragraph, witnesses watched the color leave his face. This was not merely a message from the past. It was a warning that had finally reached its destination. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles stared at the cream envelope as though touching it might release something the palace had spent years trying to contain. An archivist had discovered it during a confidential review of sealed correspondence moved from an older royal collection. The Royal Archives, the official storehouse for the monarchy's papers, had listed 4 pages under Diana's monogram. Only 3 now rested before the king. The monarch opened the first page alone. Halfway down, he removed his glasses and pressed 2 fingers against his forehead. Diana's words described the cost of their marriage, warned Camilla never to mistake victory for innocence, and demanded that William and Harry's pain never be edited out of the family story. Charles read the passage twice. Then he reached the final surviving sentence: "The boys, the crown, and the promise you made." The sentence stopped there. Charles pushed his chair back. No accusation struck him harder than that unfinished warning. Diana had written as though she expected the truth to be softened after her death, as though memory itself would become a battlefield. Worse, she named a promise Camilla had made to her, one the king had never heard mentioned. Camilla received the call elsewhere in Windsor Castle. The queen consort listened as a senior aide confirmed that Diana's secret letter had surfaced, and Charles had read it. She asked one question: "Is my name throughout?" When the answer came, she gripped her desk and ordered everyone out. Silence tightened around both rooms. Charles wanted the missing page found before anyone else saw the letter. Yet the archive record proved someone had removed it before the packet entered royal custody. The secret had not simply been forgotten, it had been managed. Before the king could summon Camilla, Prince William received a documented briefing from a palace secretary. He did not ask what his mother had written, he asked who had hidden it. As Charles remained frozen over Diana's words, 2 other people prepared to enter the crisis, one named in the letter, and one whose entire childhood had been shaped by its hidden truth. The letter did not return Diana to the palace, but it restored her voice in the one place where silence had protected everyone else. For Charles, it reopened guilt. For Camilla, it threatened the life she had spent years stabilizing. For William, it transformed an old family wound into a present betrayal. 3 people now stood around the same pages, yet each saw something different: grief, danger, and a truth that could no longer be controlled. King Charles remained beside the table long after the first briefing ended. The crown, meaning the monarch's official authority and responsibilities, had taught him how to survive public pressure. It had never taught him how to answer a dead woman who still understood his weaknesses. Diana's words spoke directly to the man beneath the title, reminding him of private assurances, broken trust, and decisions that had shaped both sons before he became king. Queen Camilla felt the same pages closing around her from another direction. She had spent years building acceptance through service, patience, and Charles's protection. Yet the letter did not challenge her title. It challenged the moral cost behind it. She understood that Diana was not asking whether Camilla had won. She was asking whether the queen consort had ever admitted who had suffered along the way. Prince William entered the private sitting room without notes or advisors. Charles began carefully, but his son stopped him and asked to read the letter himself. The prince reached the passage about the children, tightened his jaw, and placed the pages down with almost painful control. William refused to let his father see how deeply the words had struck him. Charles urged him to remember that Diana had written during a period of intense pain. William looked directly at the king and answered that pain did not make someone wrong. The words remained quiet, but the divide was brutal. Charles wanted context. His son wanted accountability. William returned to one sentence again. Diana described a private conversation in which Camilla had promised that neither boy would ever be made to feel their mother had been replaced. Charles admitted he had never known about that promise. The prince immediately asked whether it had been kept. Camilla received the question through a recorded private call from the king. She paused before answering and said the conversation had been complicated. That hesitation told Charles almost as much as the words themselves. William then found Diana's final request. She had written that forgiveness could exist only beside honesty. She did not demand revenge. She demanded that royal approval never be used to rewrite her suffering. Then the prince noticed the date. It had been written one day after a forgotten charity reception at St. James's Palace. William remembered the event, and Charles recognized the danger in his face. The true force of the letter lay not only in what Diana wrote, but in what happened 24 hours earlier, during a private encounter the palace had buried completely. Every hidden letter begins with a moment someone cannot forget. Diana's began after a small charity reception at St. James's Palace, where the smiles were formal, the voices were low, and one private exchange changed everything. There were no cameras inside the room, and no public argument to record. Yet by midnight, Diana had returned home, locked her study door, and begun writing to the woman she believed would one day stand in her place. Diana had attended the Children's Hospital fundraiser in November 1996 to thank organizers and comfort families. St. James's Palace, one of the monarchy's oldest working residences, had hosted the reception under strict arrangements. Camilla entered privately through a donor's invitation, and her name never appeared on the official program. That omission mattered because her presence was still politically dangerous and deeply personal. The reception ended without scandal. Then the silence changed. Diana entered a small withdrawing room and found Camilla waiting while staff cleared the adjoining hall. A withdrawing room was a private space where guests could step away from a formal event. Neither woman had expected to be alone, yet neither immediately left. Diana asked whether Charles planned to bring Camilla more openly into royal life. Camilla did not deny it. She held Diana's gaze and said, "The future cannot remain hostage to the past." Diana absorbed the remark without raising her voice. She asked only that William and Harry never be pressured into accepting a cleaner version of their parents' marriage. Camilla answered that the boys would eventually understand what duty required. The sentence landed harder than any open insult. Diana stepped closer and demanded one promise. She asked Camilla never to publicly reduce her place as the children's mother, no matter what title or approval came later. The future queen consort hesitated, then agreed. Diana studied her face, thanked her, and walked away without another word. By midnight, the princess had locked her study door. She wrote 4 pages by hand, recording the conversation, the promise, and the fear that royal history would one day soften what her sons had endured. On the final page, Diana named the senior courtier who knew the meeting had happened. That courtier later learned, through a documented staff account, that the letter existed. An aide intercepted the envelope before delivery and redirected it into a restricted correspondence box, a sealed archive container used for sensitive royal papers. He argued that its arrival could cause both a family crisis and lasting damage to Charles's future. The letter disappeared. Then the 4th page vanished with it. Back in the present, Prince William recognized the retired courtier's initials on a handwritten archive note. He showed them to King Charles, who immediately ordered contact through the former aide's solicitor. Elsewhere, Camilla learned that Diana had recorded their private promise word for word. The past had now acquired a witness, and before the palace could contain the damage, Charles and Camilla would have to face each other across the words they had spent decades avoiding. When Camilla entered the king's private room, The letter was already waiting between them. Charles did not rise to greet her. He did not soften the moment with ceremony or affection. He simply touched the first page and asked one question: "Did you make this promise?" For years, they had survived public judgment by standing together. Now Diana's handwriting had placed them on opposite sides of the table. King Charles dismissed every aide and closed the door himself. The private audience, meaning a meeting held without staff or public record, gave neither of them anywhere to hide. Queen Camilla sat opposite him, but the letter remained close to his hand. He asked whether the St. James's meeting had happened, and whether she had promised never to diminish Diana's place in William and Harry's lives. Camilla confirmed the conversation, though she insisted Diana had been distressed, and the exchange was more complicated than the letter suggested. She said the words had come during a difficult period, and could not be separated from that pain. Charles answered quietly that complexity did not erase a promise. His calmness made the accusation feel even heavier. Charles lifted the second page and read Diana's warning aloud. She had written that they wanted peace without first accepting the price others had paid for it. His voice faltered on the final words. The king lowered the paper and admitted he had convinced himself that time had healed what honesty never addressed. Camilla stood at once. She said she had spent decades carrying public blame, while Charles remained protected by rank, duty, and sympathy. The queen consort refused to accept the entire moral burden alone. Her anger came from years of humiliation, years of entering rooms where Diana's memory arrived before she did. Charles did not interrupt. Then he revealed what palace researchers had found in a documented archive review. An old draft speech in which Camilla had planned to describe the family as having survived a difficult former chapter. The line had been removed before delivery, yet Diana's warning now made those words sound less careless and more deliberate. Camilla's face hardened, then changed. She admitted through the private recorded conversation that she had always feared Diana's memory would outrank her living service. That fear, she confessed, had shaped how she spoke about the past with advisors. Charles looked at her without anger. His disappointment was worse. A sharp knock broke the silence. Prince William entered before either could answer. He saw Camilla standing beside the letter and told Charles that the missing page may have been found among the retired courtier's private papers. The argument had exposed the wound, but the missing page threatened to identify who controlled the truth and who still possessed the power to decide what happened next. The discovery was no longer only a family crisis. It had become a struggle over ownership. Did the letter belong to Charles as Diana's former husband, to William and Harry as her sons, to Camilla as its intended recipient, or to the monarchy whose history it could reshape? Behind closed doors, advisors spoke about archives and legal custody. But William saw something simpler. His mother's voice was being managed again. Prince William entered the archive consultation, carrying a small handwritten note Diana had given him as a child. The Royal Archives, the official collection where the monarchy preserves historic papers, legally controlled the physical letter. Yet the advisors admitted its personal contents created a moral conflict no rule could easily settle. Charles wanted the pages preserved under strict access. Camilla wanted the matter handled privately. William rejected both positions. He told the room that neither the king nor the queen should control a message written by his mother about pain they had helped create. The prince placed Diana's old note beside the official files. He told the advisors that she had been a person before she became a historical problem. His voice remained calm, but the anger beneath it was unmistakable. King Charles asked his son to trust him. As sovereign, meaning the reigning monarch with final authority over sensitive royal records, he could restrict access to the letter. But using that power would make every decision look personal. The king understood that protecting the crown could now appear identical to protecting himself. William answered that trust required the missing fourth page. He was no longer asking his father for comfort. He was testing whether Charles would defend the truth when that truth threatened his marriage, his reputation, and the monarchy itself. A sealed packet arrived before the meeting ended. The retired courtier's solicitor had sent a documented confession. The former aide stated that the fourth page had been removed after a senior royal advisor gave a verbal order. That advisor feared Diana's full message could permanently damage Charles's relationship with William and Harry. Charles read the statement twice. Camilla remained still. The confession then named the advisor and revealed something worse. It stated that Camilla had been informed in 2005 that an undelivered letter from Diana existed. She had denied knowing about the specific document, yet the account claimed she had asked that the matter remain sealed to avoid reopening old wounds before her marriage to Charles. William looked at her. The Queen Consort did not deny hearing about a message. She insisted she had never seen the pages or understood their contents. But the distinction no longer offered safety. Charles closed the confession and ordered everyone out except Camilla. William paused at the door, watching his father choose silence over explanation once again. Power had given Charles the ability to bury the crisis, but the confession made silence look like guilt, and the first consequences were already moving through the palace. By the following morning, the palace looked unchanged. Engagements remained listed. Cars continued through the gates. Staff carried folders through familiar corridors. Yet inside the royal household, every conversation had shifted. Charles had postponed 2 meetings. Camilla had cancelled a public appearance. William had left Windsor without speaking to his father. The letter had not been published, but its existence was already altering behavior, loyalties, and the emotional balance of the monarchy. King Charles moved first. He ordered a complete review of every letter connected to Diana that had been withheld, redirected, or sealed without her approval. The review, meaning a formal examination of records and decisions, would trace who had handled each document and why. He also removed the advisor named in the confession from every remaining honorary palace role. The decision was temporary, but the message was clear. Silence would no longer protect rank. Queen Camilla cancelled a literacy reception she had personally supported for years. Palace staff immediately understood the seriousness of the withdrawal. She rarely abandoned work that mattered to her, and facing cameras now risked turning every expression into a public confession. Camilla remained in her dressing room after the cancellation was announced. She removed one glove, placed it on the table, and stared at her reflection. An aide quietly asked whether she wanted tea. The Queen Consort answered, "I want one day in which the past does not enter before I do." Her anger had faded. What remained was exhaustion. Charles faced a colder silence. He telephoned William twice, but neither call was answered. A short message finally arrived, saying the prince needed time with Catherine before speaking again. The king read it repeatedly. Diana's letter had reopened his deepest fear, not public humiliation, but losing emotional access to his sons. A new packet arrived before midday. The retired courtier's solicitor sent a photographed fragment believed to belong to the missing fourth page. Diana's handwriting crossed the damaged paper with one brutal sentence. If Charles ever reads this, he must understand that silence was also a choice. The lower half had been torn away, leaving the rest of her warning hidden. Camilla then admitted the truth through a private recorded conversation with Charles. In 2005, an advisor had mentioned a hostile private message from Diana. She claimed she never saw it, and feared that asking questions before their wedding would destroy the stability they had fought to build. Charles did not raise his voice. He simply told her that choosing not to know had still been a decision. That evening, the king left without the usual circle of advisors and traveled to meet William privately. For the first time since the letter surfaced, father and son would sit together without Camilla, courtiers, or the institution between them. The palace could manage schedules and statements, but it could not control what happened when Charles sat opposite Diana's son, with no title strong enough to protect either man. Charles arrived not as a king demanding loyalty, but as a father asking not to lose his son. William met him in a private room, with no secretary, no legal advisor, and no prepared statement. Between them lay a printed copy of Diana's letter. For several minutes, neither man touched it. The turning point came only when Charles stopped defending the past and admitted that his silence had protected him more than it had protected anyone else. Catherine left them alone at Adelaide Cottage after telling William to say everything now, not after another decade had passed. The cottage, a private royal residence near Windsor, gave father and son distance from the palace machinery that had shaped every earlier conversation. Charles removed his jacket, sat without ceremony, and waited. Prince William spoke first. He said the deepest wound was not Diana's accusation against Camilla. It was the proof that his mother had expected her voice to be controlled after death. The future king warned that sealing the letter again would complete the exact pattern she had feared. King Charles did not argue. He admitted through their private recorded conversation that he had often allowed advisors to make emotionally convenient decisions in his name. He had not ordered Diana's message hidden, but he had benefited from never confronting it. That truth left him with no easy villain to blame. William looked away before revealing what the discovery had done to him. He said he had spent years separating the father he loved from the choices that hurt his mother. The letter had made that separation harder. Charles lowered his head and answered that no son should have been forced to carry such a burden. A quiet knock interrupted them. Catherine entered holding a newly received scan from royal conservators. Conservators are specialists who repair and preserve damaged historical documents. They had reconstructed enough of the torn fourth page to recover Diana's final instruction. The princess placed the scan between them. Diana had written that the letter must never become a weapon against Camilla. Its purpose was to stop false peace from being built upon erased pain. William read the words twice. He had arrived prepared to demand full publication. But his mother's final instruction changed him. The prince proposed a measured decision. Acknowledge the letter publicly, preserve the original, release an honest summary, and provide complete private copies to both sons. Charles agreed without hesitation. For the first time, the king was not asking how the truth could be controlled. He was asking how it could be honored. One final act remained. Charles still had to tell Camilla that Diana's letter would no longer be hidden. The queen consort would now have to choose whether to resist the truth or stand beside it. For the first time, father and son were no longer fighting over Diana's memory. They were preparing to honor it, even if that decision changed Camilla's place forever. At 9 o'clock the next morning, the palace issued a statement unlike any it had released before. It confirmed that a private letter written by Diana to Camilla had been recovered from restricted correspondence, and acknowledged that the message had been improperly withheld. Within minutes, the story crossed television screens, newspaper websites, and crowds outside royal gates. A family secret had become a national reckoning, and the monarchy could no longer speak around it. King Charles authorized an independent historical review, meaning an outside examination of how important royal records were handled and hidden. The statement confirmed the letter's intended recipient, the archive failure that blocked delivery, and the decision to give William and Harry full authenticated copies. That promise mattered because both sons had spent years living inside a story shaped by other people. Queen Camilla approved a line confirming that she had now read Diana's words and accepted that the letter must be preserved without alteration. She offered no excuse for remaining silent after learning that a private message existed. Her approval stopped the announcement from looking like punishment forced upon her by Charles or William. Charles stood before a television as a broadcaster read the statement aloud. The king remained still until Diana's photograph appeared beside his own. Then he turned away. He understood that the public was not simply reopening an old scandal. It was watching him acknowledge an emotional debt he could never fully repay. Prince William listened from home as the presenter described the letter not as revenge, but as a mother's demand that her children never be separated from the truth of her pain. Catherine took his hand. The prince said nothing, yet the tension in his face finally eased. For the first time, Diana's words were being defended rather than managed. Outside Kensington Palace, hundreds gathered beside the memorial gates. An evening newspaper printed an empty envelope beneath the headline, "Her words were waiting." One woman placed a handwritten note among the flowers. It read, "You were heard at last." Public anger quickly moved beyond Camilla and Charles. Commentators focused on the culture of secrecy that had allowed personal correspondence to vanish. The monarchy's admission earned cautious respect, precisely because it exposed its own failure instead of hiding behind tradition. Camilla watched the same coverage alone before Charles sent word requesting one final private meeting. The Queen Consort understood what was coming. Diana's letter had already changed the public story. Now it would force a personal decision. The world had delivered its judgment on the hidden letter, but the final verdict belonged to the two people Diana addressed most directly: the man she once married and the woman who followed her. The final meeting did not end with a crown removed, a marriage destroyed, or a dramatic departure from the palace. It ended with something more difficult: two people accepting that survival did not make them innocent. Charles and Camilla sat together with Diana's complete reconstructed letter between them. No advisor offered language. No institution supplied protection. The past had finally reached them without interruption, and for the first time, neither tried to send it away. King Charles told Camilla that the letter would remain permanently preserved, accessible to William and Harry, and recorded honestly within the royal archives. The royal archives are the official collection where important documents from the monarchy are stored for history. No future account, he said, would describe those years without acknowledging the pain, secrecy, and failures surrounding them. Queen Camilla did not resist. She admitted through their private recorded conversation that fear had shaped her relationship with Diana's memory. The Queen Consort had wanted acceptance so badly that she sometimes treated acknowledgement as a threat. She agreed to support the historical review and withdraw from every decision concerning Diana's official record. Camilla then wrote separate private letters to William and Harry. She did not ask for forgiveness, defense, or even a reply. She acknowledged the promise made at St. James's Palace and admitted that remaining silent about the hidden message had failed Diana and both sons. Charles made his own confession. The king recorded a private statement for his children, accepting that rank, advisors, and time could not remove personal responsibility. He did not blame palace staff or present himself as a victim. When William heard the recording, he finally believed his father had understood the letter instead of merely surviving its consequences. Diana's true intention now stood beyond doubt. The reconstructed final page showed that she had never demanded Camilla's destruction. She had demanded that the future not be built by erasing the emotional cost of the past. Her secret letter was not a weapon waiting to explode. It was a boundary waiting to be respected. Charles responded with permanent reform. Intimate royal correspondence could no longer be withheld, only to protect reputations. William supported the change because it transformed his mother's private pain into institutional accountability. Camilla continued her duties, but she no longer held any influence over Diana's legacy. No ordinary victor emerged. Charles remained king. Camilla remained queen. William remained loyal to the crown. Yet Diana's truth returned to its rightful place. The letter proved that dignity without honesty was only performance. Charles was shattered, because the past could not be commanded. But by accepting that truth, he stopped the monarchy from repeating its oldest mistake. Diana's letter had waited decades to be heard, and when it finally surfaced, it did not destroy the monarchy, it compelled the monarchy to tell the truth. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.